welcome. I'm Kimberly Lancaster, and I'm a Director of Data Protection and Privacy for a company here in the US. First of all, the thoughts and comments today are my own and not that of my employer. But I would like to ask if everyone could take part of the poll that I have open at this time. And also, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. The more questions, the more comments, the more lively the conversation will be. But we'll give everybody a minute to join. And again, if you don't mind responding to the poll that's in the open on your screen at this time. We'll leave this up for just another minute and then we'll get started. And again, welcome everybody. This is Scaling Privacy Operations with Small Teams. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize the poll here so that I can see what I'm doing. But again, welcome. My name is Kimberly Lancaster. This is an open question and conversation time, so please feel free to throw some questions in the chat and happy to go through things with you. Some of the things we're going to talk about today is how to scale a privacy operations program for smaller teams. Now, some of you may be part of a larger team, which still has some benefit to this conversation because work still has to be done to set up a privacy operations program and to really meet the requirements that the regulations require a company to have in place, and that your own policies and governance teams may want in place when it comes to data protection and privacy. Part of the conversation today is going to be about, what do we do to start this conversation? How do you build a good privacy and operations program? Because privacy operations, privacy, data protection, all of those elements really drive and can help lead to the success of an organization. It brings comfort to your customers when they know that you have these items in place and that you have these teams in place. It also allows you to meet certain compliance and audit regulatory requirements. You may have policies that require these things to be in place. You also, if you are processing any personal data, it's kind of a given that you need to do these things. So one of the things that I want to talk about today is when you're a small team, and I'll give the example that I've had over the last couple of years is that it's been me, myself, and I as the privacy team. And we've had some really good conversations about how to build out the program and how to make things happen. But when you are in a smaller environment, you have to be very creative. And some of the first steps that setting up any privacy operations program or privacy program is really looking at defining the program goals and the requirements that are needed to be met. Start with your roadmap and your strategy. Once you know where you want to take it and how long it's going to take you to get there, that's a big piece. Do your privacy analysis. Cannot emphasize that enough. That is a huge critical factor in being able to understand the level of risk that you have, the gaps you may have, and just the unawareness that you may have across the company and organization. Then start down the path. Start to implement things. One of the big factors in this world of doing this type of work really comes down to being flexible and being able to adjust as needs come and go and as you're needed to participate in other things. So don't hesitate. jump in with both feet, be positive about it, and really try to keep things going. But now let's talk a little bit about some very specific things that you can do once you get past your analysis stage. Once you've done your analysis on where your privacy program sits and where the privacy awareness in your company is and what's documented and what's not, step back and think creatively about how to do the work. And what I mean by that is you don't want to put everything in spreadsheets. Can you partner with other teams to reach the goals that you have? Look at low cost, easy to implement processes and tools if they're available, if you have the budget available. Be very open-minded about your engagement with partners, your stakeholders, and management. You really have to have management engagement up front. So once you complete your analysis, start that conversation with them. Help them understand what your goals are to try and meet so that they can be mapped into their larger picture overview of what the company goals are. Once you have that engagement there, then you can start to work from the bottom up with the teams that you're going to work with the partners and stakeholders that you have, and start to define reporting that you may need to do, within a month or two. Create smaller projects. Tackle things in chunks. When you're a small team, you have to learn how to be really flexible in the work that you take on, because you want to make process move and you want to make movement forward in achieving those goals that you've set and down that roadmap and path of meeting the strategy of eventually reaching, privacy maturity. Do it in small chunks. Good example. One of the things that I've done in the past is that I've worked with individual teams. So say I've started with the customer support team that handles a specific support type. And I've sat down with them, I've watched their process, I've documented their process, and I've asked questions. I can start to define some of the knowledge around how personal data is used in their roles, what awareness and what training they have, and start to bring some of that back in. And as you go through and start to tackle this at a smaller pace, where you're going team to team or you're going group to group, you start to see cohesion between those groups. So if I have 3 support teams, I've talked to 2 of them. Those managers are talking to the third manager and saying, okay, these are things that where we cross over in process, but we've got to have this data protection or this privacy process in place. And then the awareness starts with that third manager and with that third team. So don't be afraid to take small projects on. It actually makes it easy to show that you're making progress. You want to have success. You want to show management that you're making steps forward. And you want to build that relationship with those stakeholders and partners. The biggest part of the challenge for a small privacy team really comes down to that relationship building. You have to take the time to do it. If you don't take the time to do those things, then you're going to have gaps in your process and you're going to have things that go through. Another great option, build a privacy champ community. Get people from within the different organizations to come learn about privacy. Take the time to explain to them what it means, how they should use it in their own work, what the benefit is to them and to your customers. It is amazing how much more information you can glean in and gather when you have a privacy champ community. I would really highly recommend taking the time to build that community across your company. Now, some of the other things that are out here that are part of this conversation, when we talk about scale is really around how do we make sure that we're doing all of the things that we need to do. So the first is when you did your analysis, you defined where you have, hopefully you were able to define where most of the data was, how it was being used, who has basic access to it, what kind of awareness there is in the company of privacy requirements, and then putting your plan into action is really taking those learnings and turning them into a set of steps to move forward. A good example is define your data subject access request process, even if they're manual, even if you have to take and create a Jira ticket to track it or an Excel spreadsheet to track it, start the tracking of those requests. Then you can add to that and say, okay, I'm able to easily understand that I know if this, individual comes in with a data subject request, I know the 3 areas I need to check right up front. Work with those teams, build those processes. Is it an email? Is it opening a ticket in their queue? Is it a Slack message or a messenger message? How are you going to do that? Document that. By documenting the processes that you're building out, you're going to go back through and eventually find efficiencies to streamline them and maybe even automate them. Understand what your policies are, what your external privacy statement is, and remember that the employees that you're working with are just as important as the customers. So you want to understand where the employee data is as well. Build your awareness program for privacy. Is that sending out a newsletter? Is that an Ask Me Anything session? Is that setting up a Confluence page? Those kinds of things. Understand the annual training that is available and what the company has done if you've just started with the company, or if you're going to build it, what options do you have? Work with your security, compliance, risk, and audit teams to understand the controls that they have, how they've functioned in the past, where you have opportunity to continue to grow, and make sure that you have all the components to define what is important as far as the workflow that's going on. Another good thing is really trying to understand the relationships around your company. A quick area of success can often be your marketing team. Understand the cookies on the web page. Understand the marketing processes. Where are they gathering consent? How are they gathering consent? What are they doing with it? The engineering teams are another area that's great. Understand what their goals are. What do they have to achieve? How has the security and compliance and audit teams worked with them in the past that has worked or not worked? Try to fill those gaps. Privacy operations is one of those wonderful things that gets to fill in a lot of gaps and really wrap your arms around everybody in the company. I am a very strong believer in the aspect that there are a lot of things that can happen from a single person in a company to make a difference. And it's just being positive about the approach you take with others. Because they've got work, they've got timelines, they've got requirements. Trying to understand where they have allows me as an individual contributor to really try and drive in and say, okay, if you're working on this type of scenario, say as a support analyst, don't ask for everything, don't ask for their date of birth or their social security number or things like that if you don't need it to identify them. If you do, let's make sure that your system is set up so that we can gather the least amount of that information and identify that person very quickly. Last four, last three, address versus, a date of birth, those kinds of things. Really try to make it important, a conscious step about working with your partners and your stakeholders to make things happen. That's the best way as a small team or as an individual to really drive this work home. And finally, before we go too much more, we're just as mighty as the big ones. We just have to be very, very aware of what's going on and how you do things. Where do you make an impact? How do you make an impact? Where can you provide input? Listen to what's worked for other teams and what doesn't work for those teams. Partner. If you've got an audit team that they're going to go audit certain controls around data protection, understand what questions they're asking. Are they asking enough? Can they ask one or two more questions and help you out in the work you're doing? Utilize those very close and clear objects to really try and make your job a little easier. And remember, it's a lot of fun to try and help build a mountain that everybody's got to climb and be a supporting factor in that. And I want to pause here and ask if there are any questions or comments. Feel free to drop anything in the chat if you have anything. Okay. I appreciate everyone's time. You've taken time out of your day, and I do appreciate you taking time to listen to me talk about a subject that I'm very passionate around. I am on LinkedIn if you want to connect. I would love to talk with you further. Otherwise, thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your Security day. And thank you to Security for all the support on getting this out. Thank you much.